Hello, astrology friends. This is Emily the Aries.
And this is Katie the Cancer.
And we're coming at you today because we would like to talk about Cancer and Capricorn, the signs. So we kind of wanted to start with the stereotypes of Cancer versus the archetype of Cancer.
I've been thinking a lot about this and how much I just hate a lot of misconceptions of Cancer as this mom figure, because I don't think Cancers are like moms in the modern sense. And so I was thinking about that, and that kind of made me think, okay, I think it's kind of the difference between mother as a stereotype versus mother as an archetype. Because Carl Jung's archetypes are these very ancient, innate,
subconscious
things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a stereotype is more based on media.
Yes.
So I don't think Cancer is a soccer mom. It's not a mom in the 20th century sense. Cancer is a mother in the ancient sense of a creator of the earth and this sort of divine feminine principle.
Yeah, of creation and bringing life somewhere.
Mm-hmm. When I was reading about the mother archetype, the three things that I took away from it that I thought were significant for Cancer is this idea that it's a female authority and not the idea of female authority, your mother is really the first authority figure in your life.
Right.
And the other two ideas that I think stuck out with Cancer is the idea of protecting others, being protective, and the idea of creation and destruction too.
Yeah. And I think we kind of when you told me about that creation and destruction thing, my mind immediately went to the fourth house, and we know that the signs in the houses are not inherently tied, but they do have some connection, and that the fourth house rules kind of your upbringing, but it also rules your end of life circumstances and the environment that you may leave this world. So it is kind of this Cancer is that I brought you into this world and I can take you out. They're the all powerful. I mean, especially when you're a kid, the mother is kind of everything.
It just reminds me of the phrase mother, giveth, mother taketh away.
Yeah. Whatever
I give you, I can take it away again.
And that kind of leads us into the sextrology chapter that we love so much about Cancer is in sextrology they say that Cancer can represent in the tale of Cinderella, Cancer kind of represents all the female characters. So the kind, nice, angelic mother, Cinderella herself, the evil stepsisters, the evil stepmother, and the fairy godmother. All these women in this story can be Cancer and all the shades of Cancer women.
And it's when you think of the other thing too about the mother archetype is that in that sense the mother isn't always a good person. And that's another thing that we had discussed before about just Cancer is all those good mother things being caring and protective, but Cancer can be the bad mother too, in that she, not all mothers are good. A lot of times mothers can be selfish or they can be neglectful.
Mm-hmm.
So Cancer is those things too. It can embody those things too. It can embody the different characters.
And what I thought was really fascinating about what you were saying about the mother archetype and Jung especially is that the mother archetype kind of always is always related to someone else. And women especially are always kind of put in this position of being related to someone else. So you're a mother, that means you're connected to obviously a child. You're a wife, you're connected to a spouse. And we were kind of discussing if Cancer were to have a new archetype, it would be the witch. Because they're kind of this all-powerful feminine symbol that is not tied to anyone else but themselves, which I think Cancer kind of deserves a little bit.
Yeah, I think that the witch is sort of the idea of that mother energy or
creative.
Yeah, creative energy just being put towards yourself instead. So creating things for yourself instead of growing like a child, you grow like a project or something like that.
Right. I love that, honestly. And I think Cancers are really witchy. Just as a sign, they're so witchy. I mean, they're ruled by the moon. But yeah, and I don't know if we want to talk about this yet, but the idea of kind of that Cancer can kind of take nothing and grow it into something. And I think it's kind of why Jupiter exalts in Cancer, because Jupiter represents abundance and growth and all this amazingness, and it exalts in the sign of kind of the mother, because if you give, I feel like, a woman or a mother or a Cancer just a little bit, they can take it all the way. And that's kind of like, yeah, I mean, if you give a woman a seed, she can make a baby. If you give a Cancer something, they can just grow it into something amazing. They're also great with money.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. I'm like, that's why we're great in business.
Like, you can take something and really grow it. And that's what witches do. I mean, they take household items and they turn it into magic. That's kind of the Cancerian principle of this always growing creation. It's such a cool sign.
Like, they don't deserve to be equated with, like, boring soccer moms.
I know.
That's my thing.
Or crybabies. It's
Yeah.
like, witches and mothers are so powerful as symbols, and for women especially.
Like, there's a way to be emotional without necessarily being a crybaby.
Yeah.
We're not Pisces.
Right. So with that being said, that kind of leads us into Capricorn.
Now, if, like, Cancer is this mother archetype, Capricorn is very much like the father archetype instead. And when you look into, like, the father archetype, like I said, with Cancer, you get sort of the female authority. Capricorn is more like the male version of authority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of this, what is the Jungian father? Like, the Jungian mother is kind of this divine feminine creation, but, like, the Jungian father is this distant, kind of almost stranger that comes in later, which is really interesting.
Well, when you think of, like, the myth associated with Saturn is Kronos. He was the original ruler of the gods, like the original Titan ruler, and he's taken down by his son, Zeus. So it's almost like Capricorn is this older, even version of the father, too. Like,
yeah,
you know, toppled by his own son. Like,
mm-hmm. In sextrology, how do they describe Capricorn man? That he's in a graceful decline. Aw, but
it almost makes you think of, like, this old image of a father who's, like, kind of distant and goes to, you know, work a little bit, who is out, like, taking care of business a little bit, and
brings home the bacon.
Yeah. It's sort of like this distant father idea, or even like a lethargic father.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's always interesting when people talk about the old, when we were learning about the planets, is that Saturn ruled, as far as the eye could see, we could only see to Saturn. It was our restriction and it was our boundary. But we were kind of reading in sextrology again about Capricorn and how it kind of gets this stereotype of being very restrictive and very limiting and very kind of prohibitive and like prohibition. But in fact, it's kind of like the dad thing where they're being protective because they care about you and they want to save what they care about. So all these rules and regulations are there for a reason. It's not this cold, like, taskmaster that we kind of associate often with Saturn. It's more of this caring, like, I'm trying to help you, I'm trying to save you, and I'm trying to protect you because I know better. And I've been through it. Like,
it's kind of like how you think about if each sign is kind of a progression from the sign before it. You've got Sagittarius, who's this really expansive, you know, indulgent character who's just kind of about abundance, you know, and they just kind of gain and take and take and take. And when you get to Capricorn, it's not just being restrictive just because it can. It's not just being reactive to that. It's like aware of what it's like to have the abundance, and they know now that they want to conserve some of it for later, or that, you know, they know when enough is enough.
Yeah.
It's not just, like she's saying, like, not just restrictive to be restrictive, just to be mean. It's doing it in a way that's like they know when, you know, you've gone too far.
Mm-hmm. And sextrology kind of relates it to, like having this beautiful reserve of water in Capricorn and having that kind of be representative of Jupiter's abundance and good fortune, and having Capricorn be the protective mountain surrounding it. Or, you know, Capricorn being the horn of plenty, protecting the abundance that kind of Sagittarius brought. So.
And Just to kind of go back to the mother archetype, like, if you go to the opposite of the witch archetype, if you think about, like, a character who might represent it, you know, the list had, like, the doctor, the elder, like, the old wise man. Those are all, like, Capricorn kind of characters, in a sense, too, where you've got these people who kind of been through it all, they've seen it all, and they have taken a lot of wisdom from it.
Yeah, like the town elder. Yeah.
I think with both Cancer and Capricorn, you get these very, like, traditional characters, too, where it's just, like, those signs in general just have a very traditional sense to them of, like, with Cancer, you've got, like, tradition, you know, family traditions and, like, heritages and stuff and, like, kind of these old ideas. And with Capricorn, you also get kind of these old ideas of, like,
conservation and using wisdom and elders and respecting elders, I feel.
And just being, I think, very realistic.
Yeah. Pragmatic.
Yeah.
We've kind of had discussions about how kind of Cancer and Capricorn do get stereotyped so hard into, like, Capricorn is this cold, emotionless figure and Cancer is this crybaby. And we've discussed about how Cancer is actually quite a sharp, like, Cancer has a sharp mind. I mean, they're good businessmen, and Capricorn, I mean, they're the sea goat, so they kind of do have this wateriness to them, and they're not totally cold and emotional. And unemotional, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about, I don't know, almost even thinking about my own father sometimes, too, you have this sort of stoic figure, but it does radiate emotion in itself. Like, being stoic kind of indicates in a way, like, that you are feeling something strongly, but you're just being very reserved about it.
Yes.
So, like, you can be emotional and be stoic at the same time, like, but in being stoic, you're kind of showing, like, I'm upset. You know, there's almost like a kid who throws a tantrum, but they won't say anything.
Yeah.
Like, well, they're not saying anything. They're not, like, acting out their emotions, but you can still tell that they are mad.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying about Capricorn being the mountain, another sextrology reference, but Capricorn being symbolized by a mountain, this very solid, solitary, kind of iconic figure in itself. And then with Cancer is kind of the moon or the tides, this changing, ever fluctuating being. Capricorn, on the other end, is this almost timeless, like, proud, stationary figure.
Yeah, Cancers are always changing, like the moon is ruler. I liked what you said about how it'll almost, like, wax and wane. You know, Cancer's always growing into something. You know, they're always moving towards the full moon, and then they're, you know, retreating back into the new moon phase where you can't see it, and then it grows out again and you see it again. Whereas the Capricorn is more of a permanent figure, whereas Cancer is, like, comes and goes and is up and down.
And that's interesting what you say about permanent figure, because that's kind of what, not to get into houses, because that's a whole other thing, but the 10th house represents your legacy and your reputation and what you do leave behind in the world, and, like, yeah, having this kind of permanent...
What do you want your mark to be?
Yeah, leaving your mark on the world. So, that's just barely even touching Cancer and Cap, because they're such big signs.
I think we've covered a lot about it, though, and I think, like, I love getting back in touch with, like, the really old kind of archetypes that do go with each sign. Because I think it goes back to a lot of, like, really old school astrology, which I like.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And we forget about it, and it kind of gets lost in some of the pop astrology, but...
It almost reminds me of, like, the Vedic astrology, too, like, where it's just, you know, that very old school sense of, like, things can be, you know, benefic and malefic.
Yeah.
And, I don't know.
Yeah, you have to know what's a malefic planet, what's a benefic planet. Even if you aren't into Vedic astrology, it's just so useful to, like, know where you're coming from. All right, guys, well, this was just what we wanted to talk about today. Thanks for listening, if you listened to the whole thing. And, bye!
Bye!